Chapter 150. After figuring out the cause of the matter, Li felt even more upset in his heart. Being cheated by others and being cheated by oneself were two completely different feelings. He raised his head to look at Emingzu and sighed in his heart. This girl was really honest, he was just saying it casually. Who would have thought that anyone could become a county lieutenant? Moreover, he didn't expect that this honest girl would take it so seriously. If he had known that this would be the result, he wouldn't have said that it would be a county lieutenant. At the very least, he would have been a prefectural magistrate. While he was thinking about this, Emingzu had already taken out a small unopened wine jar from the corner of the counter. She sat back at the table with satisfaction and took back the wine cup from Li Yi's hand to refill it. The cup that he drank just now was at most water wine. This scholar's alcohol tolerance was probably similar to that cheap cousin of his. You have a say in the emperor's side? Li Yi came back to his senses and didn't blame her in his heart. Sort of. Emingzu nodded as a tacit agreement. Smelling the fragrance of the wine, a trace of satisfaction flashed in her eyes and she picked up the wine cup. Li Yi looked at her and asked tentatively, "Then how about we make a deal? You don't want to be a county lieutenant, but a prefectural magistrate?" Emingzu didn't manage to swallow a mouthful of wine and spat it out. Li Yi, who was sitting right in front of her, was caught off guard. He was caught off guard and the wine was sprayed all over his face. He wiped the wine off his face and looked at her with a stiff expression. Do you think a prefectural magistrate is a cabbage? Even someone as calm as her couldn't help but lose her composure after hearing Li Yi's words. Not to mention a prefectural magistrate, when he saw the appointment again, he was in his room, staring at a kite wasn't something she could control. It was the princess's birthday, to a prefectural magistrate was hiding in his room watching a kite at night. After throwing him a supercilious look, it was not stood up and walked outside. When he saw Li Yi, his eyes lit up. The position of a county lieutenant, he grabbed the kite and stood up, saying, "If there's nothing else, I carried a heavy weight of the county government from the roof." Seeing Professor falling away, he turned back, glaring at him. If I made this kite bigger, many people would carry away the head of the if I made it one of the middle-aged man, they were all considered rations in the future. After listening to his words, he don't mention it again. He could only cause her frustration if he continued to talk. However, he could give him a little more inspiration. He was afraid that to share the ocean and raised his head while Galileo discovered the law. He felt like he didn't discover the law blankly at Enchanting, and the right brother after so many years seems no longer not everyone shares that scolded him and Emingzu said expression. Of course, the premise was that there would still be such people. A person who came it would be a straight off. He don't find language was also interested. I didn't say that Emingzu had original situation doubted about he must have shared skills with seeing that his magistrate is ever such a however he was young and wonders how he could find someone he could not take one of them said However, the Empress at this moment was completely cause for the man was a little careful. It was strange after knowing the truth. Today was not a special day. He broke out, but he did no matter. They didn't prepare him. Even though he always times the county magistrate, you're still the advantage no more terrifying. Stewart had studied hard. The county doctor couldn't celebrate about one thing is their other foundation. It might grant be that generation was scholar like one. Yes, it still become other troubles higher duty and although the surrounding jail scholar there were also in all country. I heard that we did my body shows one face question the identity of the my grandfather people as guards down because they were also highlighted. He was also welcoming areas now was talking about them when this damn something I didn't know said no one realized that all those all of my trajectories were hearing student anyone of the officers county magistrate only did not research this was the one in the condition world. There was hope, however, this way done very well the entire time. County magistrate one time that was a ball that people in the water. Lee was a little set a word in his water. He strode over young crosses and asked, I was also inspired when students wanted to solve the man was the local unit she had accepted in ways this was very no raised and also this town also just here to come in the water when they walked so just do this don't worry about thank you he said these were local my husband strong magistrate and I was also very shrewd and cunning. It was even more probably my husband became a county just immediately during county magistrate Stewart wanted at the entrance of the county jail magistrate chapter 1 magistrate turned out that it was magistrate he turned to Lee and when he was short while he smiled the imperial placed on a loud you're welcome he had a run he had the way he discerned stole county magistrate near middle-aged was there he heard what county magistrate Lee was on this dynasty relationship just rubbed his nose on his magistrate blood officials had chapter 1 speaking of war had this white fungus to avoid corruption in the dark season council white fungus is also officials were not allowed to see dishes they couldn't help what he wanted because of the guest the middle just thinking that it was really he said that he was afraid that the person were also the middle-aged man this person also was reached another person sitting next to him the old man who was Stewart wandered down the street without travel he smiled one area went out the table he handed over something just as like supply however thinking about expressions of words would only take one day to travel take a few thousand shares to every city one to one of them however one might as well to the palace if he gave something he didn't think of a way this time he did not go out he was in the ministry did not have a lot of chance to however nor distance herself from the he didn't expect avoiding almost all situations in the she told her causing all conjecture with not no story she was which was if it weren't this how could they make her away from the position of sometimes useless people returning to this house of the magistrate and brought it here although he still had came to get his first day of course the magistrate could only be certain he will show venture he could not say it out loud the person didn't want to take up his post after a short moment Lee did said with a smile for a second we are hearing such an argument that scholars just as surprised an invitation why don't we take advantage of the magistrate to either sail our way to some why don't we go and have a would then he looked at the do and run over to consider this taking the revenge shaken after the little prince however as long as you do no objection I will take you to him and the rest of the county magistrate Stewart wanted to take the young man in the servant was now that the executions were back in their country Stewart wanted to slam down like interest of the persecution every one of them shared the interest in you say how dare you invitation was all clearly saw the conversation that the denied the noise but you very along the way to punish you since he had nothing to do your honor it was good to have someone to chat although that man is out a few times although the person in front of him might be scholars and I joined was not that one air and the only one that all argued to him were not in the end clear that he stole captured by this atmosphere over slowly one really did even if we go to the shore don't torment perhaps the baby out of each although we don't get along knows if she has any help following Stewart we can't act right left and right why should I went deep into the Wong just man stood up gradually if you haven't too many times your honor you don't know how terrifying the young man kowtowed if you act rashly county magistrate you will follow several footsteps but hearing this again when he said this his face was filled when he was about he couldn't find other evidence he couldn't help feeling a headache forget it he began to miss county magistrate Joe in the end she had to county magistrate useless the rest of them could only this was the first time he got up and walked to the way of ruling a country was useless the man he decided to liven up the atmosphere. He then narrowed his eyes and looked at the young man in front of him. He didn't have any hope that this new county magistrate could solve the case. Instead, he was more curious about the young man. Not until then did the runners know that the young man who came in with county magistrate Lou was actually the new county magistrate of this county. But when he thought about it carefully, There was said that this county magistrate was appointed by His Majesty, but they didn't expect by disasters. So young. The drought has just this county magistrate came at the right floods. County magistrate Northwest obviously wanted to shift the blame. Have run amok. Moreover, hearing the familiar line of county magistrate repeatedly invaded our borders, that he could change his name to rumors among the people that it is because he cupped his hands to county magistrate Lu and so many bad things have happened. Thinking that he would have to deal with the middle-aged man all day his words, he was interrupted more agitated and his face darkened. What does natural and man-made disasters have to do with the accused and said loudly, according to what you said, when you argued just now, I accidentally fell when I went out in the morning, raised your voice, can I also blame it on the Emperor's loss of virtue? In just a few words, aside from the fact that he was inexplicably made a county lieutenant, to cover up the truth, which caused Li to have some complaints about the current emperor, that you were panicking. He had a good impression of him in other aspects. You look shifty-eyed and ugly from the various government decrees carried out in the Jin Kingdom. If you didn't steal the silver, His Majesty did not seem to be a fatuous ruler. Speaking of this, just the temporary exemption of taxes in Qing and Prefecture and the surrounding cities was enough to make even Li remember his kindness. The elder behind the man wanted to say, "Guards, drag him out and behead him." How dare he use such an indecent word in front of the current silence. However, county magistrate Lu took advantage of His Majesty waved his hand behind him, but he spat it all out. After glaring angrily at the young man, he turned his head abruptly and stared at Li with wide eyes. Naturally, doubts, Li did not know that his invisible flattery had hit the heart of the man in front of him. It was not easy to be an emperor these days to say such a thing. Within the borders of the Jin Kingdom, wherever there was a disaster, didn't have the right to approve where strange things happened, let alone they were all blamed on the emperor. In order to prevent indiscriminate killing, according to the law of the Jin Kingdom, the application for the death penalty should be reported to the higher levels and reviewed by the Ministry of Penalty. Even he would have scolded him to his heart's content. Finally, it should be signed by the emperor himself. When he looked at the young man again, his eyes were full of admiration. Even if his identity was as you have insight, he didn't have the right to give such an order. However, seeing that he said, "Drag him out and behead him," although the imperial examination was still the most common and important way for scholars to enter the official career, was unfathomable. The country was in urgent need of talents and would not block all paths. Not to mention the Yamen runners in the court. Outstanding talents when the young county lieutenant opened his mouth, they were a little confused. Examined by the Ministry of Raising his voice meant that he was presented to the emperor. Rubbing his nose meant that he was trying to cover up and hire them. Rubbing at this moment that he was the young man in front of him, this method of solving the case was simply unheard of. Of course, with his status, what was more unbelievable was that he looked local officials to recommend him, which meant that he was not examination by the Ministry of Appointments. Since one was being ugly a crime, it was only a matter of a word for him to be more sloppy in solving a case. At such a young age, you do have some real talent. Said next confirmed although you are only an elementary scholar, it is not a big deal. Drag him out and behead him. The imperial court will never let talents go to waste. The Yamen runners smiled bitterly in their hearts. If you are interested, I can recommend you to the imperial court. Not the emperor. I think it is possible to give you such a great position. Li Xian's mouth twitched. The middle-aged man looked at the shocked expressions on everyone's faces. He really cherished talents. They were just a bunch of country bumpkins who hadn't seen the world before. He was very much in agreement with Zhou Bao's views on governance. After all, he did not standing in front of them was Zhou Bao who could turn right into wrong, black into white, which added a lot of ground under his feet into a ball. Since he was a talent, he should be used by the country. People doubt their lives. The ruler and the officials should work together to build a harmonious and beautiful country. Having known Li Yi for such a long time, Li Xian was not something a wise ruler would do. There was no need to doubt anything hand that had just stretched out. If you think what he said is wrong, there is only one possibility, and that is that you are not smart. It seemed a little familiar. In other words, his IQ was not high enough. It was just a casual chat. The word IQ from Li so long ago. Indeed, at this moment, the young man kneeling on the ground was dumbfounded. If he had known earlier, he would not have said those words just now. He raised his head and glanced at the young man who had just spoken. With a face full of regret. To tell you the truth, the young man's face was serious and did not look like he was joking. He suddenly felt his vision go black and instantly collapsed to the ground. Even Wang Er, who was standing beside him, was stunned when he heard this. 164. Was this Lord serious? How come I have never heard of a chronic illness that prevents one from becoming an official? Lord, please spare my life. The young scholar put down his chopsticks and leave. The young man got up from the ground with a smile as if he was pounding garlic. This person used such a clumsy excuse to brush off his majesty. I was greedy for money. How despicable. That day, I accidentally saw the place where the master hid the silver. So attempting to deceive the emperor, what is yesterday when the master was not according to the law, he should be beheaded. Now I've buried the man's voice paused tree in the backyard. However, I'm willing to confess everything. He did not know His Majesty's identity. This young man was just a lighter servant. How would he know about the twists and turns of criminal law? But a soft heart. When he heard the words, "Your bad habit hasn't changed in decades," he was completely dumbfounded. The middle-aged man said with a smile. How would he dare to deny it? A hint of warmth appeared on the old man's tails of silver. He had watched His Majesty lose his life. From the time he was a toddler learning to speak to the time he became a little prince and was made crown prince by the late emperor. All the Yamen runners could not help cursing in their hearts. It had been
How could
decades.
it work like this?
It was said that
County
the emperor
Magistrate Lu was also
but he knew
extremely
very
shocked.
well that the current
Glancing
emperor
at
valued
Li Yi, who had
relationships
recovered
and
his
was a
calm
rare
expression,
wise ruler.
he could not
The
figure out
relationship
whether it
between
was
the
a
two
fluke
seemed
or
to
a
be
plan.
master and servant.
If it was the
but
latter,
it was better
he would
than
have
that.
to re-examine
Let's
this
go.
county magistrate.
After a walk, my chest
The reason
doesn't feel
was that
so
Li
tight
Yi's
anymore.
official position
Go
was
and
only
investigate
obtained by
that
his
young man just
background,
now.
and he would at
He's so
most be a
young, but he
muddle-headed
doesn't want
county
to serve the
magistrate.
country and wants to
Now
be a
it seemed
hermit.
that he had
However,
underestimated
although
him.
his personality
Seeing the
still
young
needs
man
to be polished,
kowtowing
he
as
has
if he was
potential.
pounding garlic,
The middle-aged
Li Yi
man
felt
said
a little
with a
bored.
smile and walked
A few
outside
days
with his
ago, when
hands
he was
behind his
basking in
back.
the sun in the
The
yard,
old man
he read a
followed
few
closely
leisurely books,
behind,
such as
the
How
two
to
of them
Recognize
left,
Micro-Expressions,
countless silhouettes
The
flickered
Secret
in
of
the
the
surrounding
Micro-Expressions,
darkness,
The
disappearing
FBI
in the
teaches
blink
you
of
to
an
read
eye.
minds.
And
After
so on.
strolling out of the garden,
Originally, he was just
looking
slightly
for
hungry,
novelty, but he did
Li
not
felt
expect it
regret.
to be useful
If
here.
he had known that this
He had
high-ranking
thought that this
official
young
would
man
be the
could
same
hold
as
on for a
Professor
while,
Feng and
but
make
he
him
did
an
not
official in
expect
the
that he
end,
would confess
he wouldn't
so
have said
soon.
so much just
At
now.
this time, the young
Otherwise,
runner's
he wouldn't
eyes
have
on
been
Li
so
Yi had
hungry.
changed dramatically.
He only drank half a
No
bowl
one
of
thought that
porridge
this
and only
young
ate a
county
few
magistrate
mouthfuls.
was just a
Was a
good-looking
pity.
but useless
Shaking his
embroidered
head,
pillow.
he decided to
Most
go
of
say
them were
goodbye to Li
constables,
Shen and
and
go
their
back to
daily
sleep
duty was
early.
to chase down
At this
criminals
time,
and
not
catch
far
thieves.
away, around a wide
County
pavilion,
Magistrate Joe
there
was
was
a
a
lively
scene
scene
of
of
laughter
to
and
help with
toasting.
some trivial cases,
Most of the people
and they were
gathered
also
here were
good at
scholars.
interrogating cases
At this
by
time of
torture.
turbulence,
This county
thanks to
magistrate
Prince
was
invitation,
observant. They
and he
gathered
could even
together to
notice such
brainstorm and
details as
discuss
rubbing
the
his
affairs
nose
of the
and
country
rubbing his
using the
thumb.
opportunity
Although
of the
they were
Wang
not
Fei's
clear
birthday
about the
banquet.
meaning of the actions
Perhaps
that
they
county
could really come
magistrate
up with
Li
a
had
good
just
solution.
said.
They were
Other than
already
the
70% convinced after
prefecture
seeing
who
the
had
young
been
man
invited,
confess. The new Jinshi who had graduated from
Then
Qing
he convicted
and
him with
prefecture
ugliness
this year
to
were
disturb
all
his
included.
mind,
And
these
the people
people
were the
drag
future
him out
pillars
and
of the
behead him.
country. What's more, it was a stroke of genius that made the criminal's mind
Once the
completely
court
collapse,
officially appointed
and he
them,
confessed
they
to the
would
theft.
immediately take up
Based
their
on this
posts
alone,
and officially
it could be
become
seen that
civil
he was
servants
more
of the
powerful than
Jing
County Magistrate
The reason
Joe.
why he had
This
invited
young
them
county
tonight was
magistrate
also to
was
give
not
them
simple
some guidance.
Hey, why did
Many
you
of
say
the new
those things
Jinshi
just
were
now?
high-spirited and
Li
had
Shen
not yet been
returned to his
tempered by the
curious
cruel
nature,
reality.
and he asked,
They were
not
filled
caring
with the
that they
desire
were in
to
the
serve
court.
the country and
He was
finally
really
had a
curious
chance to
about how
express
Li
their
Yi guessed
ideals
that
and
person's
ambitions.
mind through these
Using
subtle
this
movements.
opportunity, they
If
would
he could
point out
learn
the
this
country,
trick,
encourage
would he be
writing,
able to
and when
see
they got
through people's
excited, they
mind
would write a
easily in
poem.
the future? It seemed
Not
that if
only
they didn't
Li
do
Yi,
this,
but
they
all the
wouldn't be
people
able to
present were
express their
curious about
concern
this
for the
question at
country
this
and the
moment.
people.
In
In
an
an
instant,
instant,
more
there
than
were
10
courtesans
pairs of
and
eyes
dancers
looked
to
over.
add to the fun.
Even County
Every time
Magistrate
someone
Lu
wrote
was
a
no
poem, they
exception.
would go up and
Li
sing
Yi
it. Turned to look at
On
Li
an
Shen.
occasion like
Do you
tonight,
really want to
no
know?
matter if the poem
Li
was
Shen
good or
looked
not,
at him with a
no
faint
one would
smile,
give it a bad
and his
review.
heart skipped a beat.
Of course,
He
poetry
suddenly had
was
a bad
also
feeling.
within the scope of
He
the
recalled that
examination.
every time Li Yi
Those who were
subverted
able
his
to pass the
understanding,
Jinshi
it
exam
made
would
him
write
doubt the
poems
world,
that weren't
and he
too
could not
bad.
eat or sleep
At
well.
this time, in a
Only by
remote corner of the
experiencing it
venue,
himself could
County
he understand the
Magistrate
feeling.
Lu sat alone on
Let's
an
talk
empty
about
table
this in a
and
few
drank
days.
by himself.
Li
He
Shen's
seemed
face
a little
turned pale,
lonely and
and he
desolate.
hurriedly shook his head
Magistrate
and said,
Dong and a few
thinking
other
of those
officials
terrible
sat in the middle,
experiences,
surrounded
the
by the
curiosity in
stars.
his heart was
As the
instantly
small
reduced by
attendant
more
of the
than
county
half.
magistrate,
Li Yi
he
did
was
not
too
explain,
embarrassed
and
to
the
join
Yamen
them.
runners were
He
very
could only sit
disappointed.
alone in the corner
Even
and
though
watch the
County
new Jinshi
Magistrate
perform.
Lu was also curious,
He thought back
it was
to the
not
days when he
appropriate
was
to ask at this
high-spirited,
moment, and his eyes were
He
blurred.
waved his hand,
The wine
and
in
some
the
Yamen
mansion was
runners
good,
already
and
understood
County
and took the
Magistrate
young
Lu
man
was
who
a
stole
little
the silver away.
unconsciously. After the
Slightly
case was
tilting
solved,
his head,
before County
he saw a
Magistrate Lu
familiar
had
figure
time to
turning
breathe a
out of
sigh
the
of
garden
relief,
and walking
a
straight
Yamen
towards
runner
him.
came from outside
County
the door and
Magistrate
whispered
Li.
something in his
County
ear.
Magistrate Lu was
Lord
puzzled.
Lu, about the
He
arson
didn't know
case,
why
Shopkeeper
County
Lu came
Magistrate
to urge
urged
us
us
again.
alone.
Hearing
He
that,
stood up and
County
was ready to
Magistrate
greet him
Lu
when he
rubbed the
came.
area between his
In the
eyebrows
mansion
and
tonight,
sighed in
both
his
of them
heart.
were alone,
When would
and they
such
felt
days
that they
come
were
to
in
an
the
end?
same boat.
County
Just as he
Magistrate
put
Lu's
down the
eyes
wine cup
suddenly
and
lit
stood
up
up
when
from
he
his
glanced
seat,
at County
he saw two
Magistrate Li.
figures walking out behind County Magistrate Li.
The one
Chapter
walking in
front was a middle-aged County Magistrate Lu tidied up his official robe, dignified air of being in a high position for a long time. With a smile, with the help of the lamplight, I really admire you for solving the case so well. See his face. If today's event is spread out, that made his legs afraid that our Anshi County would be much more peacefully sober up. County Magistrate Lu was not sure about in more than 10 years when he met County Magistrate Lu. He would never forget as long as one was the rest of his life. He would like to listen to flattery in the Golden Palace could always shorten the distance between County Magistrate Lu's life. You flatter me. Who could forget the Emperor's face? County Magistrate Lu was his superior. So Li couldn't always put on airs. As soon as Li walked out of the garden, he kept his hands with a smile and said very modestly, gloomy old man County Magistrate Lu was a bit flattered when he suddenly showed and walked in the opposite direction. He thought that County Magistrate Li didn't seem to be like those rich playboys, so he couldn't help but mention the matter of making him an official again. There is still an important case to be solved. Where should I find Magistrate Li has nothing to do? Why don't you sit down and continue to watch? Sat back in his seat again. You can also give me some advice when necessary. County Magistrate Li, he didn't even dare to think about it. He even treated in front of him so casually. Magistrate Joe, how could he would probably casually say, "Old Joe, I have something important to deal with. In such a large case will be handed over, and it didn't seem good to leave without saying goodbye. You are not allowed to go home for dinner if you don't finish the sentence." When Li was thinking of finding someone to bring him a message and go back hall to taste tea and have fun with his concubine. It was a young woman. He had been a county magistrate for so many years, and this period was the most agreed time for him. Unfortunately,
her eyebrows were
Lee
distant
was not
and her
an
eyes
insensible
were like
person.
autumn water.
In the future,
was
they would
indeed
meet
a
each other
peerless beauty.
frequently in the same
Puff.
county government.
Seeing this
so he had
peerless
to build
beauty,
a good
Lee
relationship
couldn't
with
help
County
laughing
Magistrate
for a
Lou.
moment. What are
After
you
all,
laughing at?
nominally, a
County
trace of
Magistrate
blush
Lou
appeared
was
on
the
the woman's
boss here.
face, and then
This
she
is my
became
duty.
angry and said,
It's good for me
"What
to
are
get
you laughing
familiar
at?"
with it in advance.
I'm not laughing.
If I can help you,
Lee
it will
looked
be better.
serious, but the next
Lee
moment
smiled
he couldn't
and sat
help
on his
laughing
seat
again.
County
the way you
Magistrate
dress,
Lou
it's
nodded
really,
and felt
really
very comforting.
the anger on the woman's
Then
face
he sat
deepened.
back in the hall and
She reached
slammed
for
the
her
gavel
waist
again,
out of habit,
bring the
only
criminal.
to realize that
The
she
young
had changed her
Prince
attire
Li Xian,
today.
who was sitting next
She did
to
not
Li
carry
Yi,
her saber
turned his
either.
head to look at him
She
from time
waved
to
her
time.
fist at Li Yi
He
and
really
said,
wanted to
"I
learn
dare
how to
you to
read
laugh
people's
again."
minds.
Although
But he
it
was
was normal
worried that
for a
if
woman
Li
to
opened
dress
his
like
mouth,
this, he would
Li
suffer
was
for a
used
few
to her
days
wearing
again.
the police uniform.
He was in a dilemma.
He didn't see
At
her
this
as
time,
a woman from
Li
the
Yi's
bottom
heart
of
was
his heart.
depressed.
At this
A few
moment,
days ago,
she stood
he
in
had
front
read
of
a lot
him
of
in a
books
different
on
outfit, and he
microexpressions
was really
and
not
FBI
used to it.
investigation.
However,
And now he
looking
had to
at her
use them
clenched
so
fist,
soon.
Li
Could
knew
it be
that
that
if he
all of
continued
this
to
was
laugh like
predestined?
this,
A
something
moment
bad would
later,
happen.
a middle-aged
He
man
hurriedly
was
stopped
escorted
laughing
into
and
the
said,
hall.
"I won't
After
laugh,
he was
I won't
asked to
laugh.
kneel in the hall,
If you see
he
Li
announced
Xian
loudly,
later, remember to
"Sir,
tell him
the
that I'm going
criminal is
back
here."
first." County
Goodbye,
Magistrate Lu slammed
Seeing
the
that the
gavel and said
situation was
loudly,
not good,
Zhao
Li
Fang
slipped
slipped
away.
away.
Magistrate Lu,
Emingzu
Magistrate
clenched her
Lu,
fist and looked at him
Magistrate
with some
Lu,
shame
I'm
and
asking
anger.
you again.
Business was more important, so she didn't care and strode forward. However,
Why
if
can
I'm
you sing
convicted
other
of
people's
arson,
lyrics,
I'll
but
be
not
punished
mine?
severely.
Do you look down on me?
Magistrate Lu picked
When
up
passing
a red
through the
stick and
place
was
where the
about to
scholars
throw it at
gathered,
Zhao Fang.
an angry voice
Suddenly,
came to
an
his
idea
ears.
flashed through his
Li
mind.
looked in that
He
direction
immediately
in
waved
surprise
his
and
hand
shook
and
his
the
head.
stick fell to the
He
ground.
still felt that it was more
He then
important
said
to go home
coldly,
and sleep.
"The criminal
So he didn't
Zhao
plan to
Fang
join in
set
the
the
fun.
fire without any
When he was
reason.
about to leave,
The
he heard the
evidence
next
is
voice and
conclusive,
paused.
but he still dares to deny it. Men drag him out and behead him." The runners were startled when they heard the explanation. They glanced
Chapter
at Magistrate Lu,
165.
then at Li Yi.
Young master,
The
you
magistrate was
misunderstand.
applying what he
I
had
have no
learned on
such
the spot.
intentions.
Li
It is
Xian
just
curled
that I
his
am not
lips.
feeling well today.
It was interesting to see
has
something
been
like
greatly
this happen the
affected.
first time.
If I
but it was
continue,
boring
I
the
fear
second
I will
time.
disturb the
Li
mood of
Yi
all
was
the young
startled
masters.
too, but he found the
beautiful girl
magistrate to
bowed
be
and said
interesting.
apologetically,
Zhao Fang's
"What do you mean
expression
by not
changed when
feeling
he
well?
heard the words drag
Don't
him
use
out
this
and
excuse
behead
to
him."
brush me off."
He was about
A
to
young
say
man
something,
stood up
but
from
when he
his
raised
seat
his
and said
head and saw the
impatiently,
expressions
"How
on the
come I don't
runners'
see
faces,
anything wrong
his
with you?
heart skipped a
If you were
beat.
asked to sing, then sing."
He knew that the magistrate
Today all
was
the
trying to
officials and your
intimidate
peers
him.
are present.
A magistrate
If you don't
did not
sing,
have
it
the
will ruin
authority to
everyone's
decide the
mood.
life and death of
At
a
this
person.
time, he was annoyed
He
that this
straightened his
performer
body
did
and
not
said
know
in a
how to
clear voice,
appreciate favors.
"Sir, even if
It
you
was
behead
because
me,
he had
I
seen
didn't
how
set
good
the
she was
fire."
at singing that he had
His
asked her to
attitude
sing
was
his
as
best
if he had
work.
been wronged
He
and would
hadn't
rather
thought that
die
she
than
would
sing
surrender.
someone else's work. So
Magistrate Lu's
straightforwardly
expression
and readily.
froze.
When it
He
came
was
to him,
startled
she
for
made
a moment
excuses.
before he could
This
no
was
longer
clearly
suppress
making him
the
lose
anger in
face
his
in
heart.
front of all his
Why
peers
did
and
the
all
same
the
trick
officials.
work so well when
The beautiful
County
girl had a
Magistrate Li used
difficult
it just now?
expression. Why
Today
did the
was
man
Wang
Cao Tau's
Tao's
birthday
birthday
banquet? But it didn't
All
work
the
at all
famous
when it came to
performers
him.
and singers of
Is
the
he looking
prefectural
down on
city
me? Had been
Magistrate
invited
Lu?
to sing and dance.
Magistrate Lu became
could
even
not
more
refuse.
furious when he saw
Even
the
though she
runners
was
around
on her
him
period,
not
had
help
a
but
cold
laugh.
and was not
Just
feeling
as he
well,
was about
she
to
didn't dare to
execute the
disobey.
punishment,
Magistrate
time,
slowly
the feeling
rose
of
from his
discomfort
seat
was
and
getting
brought
worse.
his fists together.
Her head
before
was
he said,
dizzy and she
"A
couldn't
human
sing no
life
matter
is
how
at
good
stake.
she was.
Sir,
It
I'm
was not
afraid
suitable
it's
for her to
inappropriate."
speak.
But she knew that none of the people present tonight could be offended by a small performer like her. Gritting her teeth, she prepared to nod and agree when a laughing voice came from the side. County Magistrate
walked
Lu was
over and said with a
overjoyed after
smile,
being interrupted
"Master
by
Cui,
Li
you
Yi.
don't know, but
He had really
Ruoqi
lost
is not
his
feeling
mind
well
due to
today.
Zhao Fang's anger.
If Master Cui
If he
doesn't
were to
mind,
throw a
how
stick
about
at
I
him,
sing
it
this
would be
song?"
fine if he was the one
There
who
was
started the
gratitude in
fire,
Wan
but if
Ruoqing's
he were to
eyes as
blame
she
the
looked
wrong
at the
person,
singer.
there would be
She
a
was
bunch
also
of imperial
skilled in
censors
singing
waiting
and
for
had
him.
some fame in Qing and
Perhaps
Fu.
because of such
The
a
two
small
of them
matter,
did not have a
his
close
majesty happened
relationship.
to be in a bad mood,
She had not thought
and
that she would
County
come
Magistrate
forward to
Lu
help her out
would
at
have
a
to
time
pack
like
up and
this.
leave. Who do
What
you
do you
think you
think,
are?
County Magistrate
The Chui
Li?
man glanced
County
at her coldly
Magistrate
and turned
Lu
to look
withdrew
at
his
Wan
hand
Ruoqing
from the stick and said
in a
with a
cold
smile,
voice he said,
"A human
"You really
life is
won't
more
sing?
important than anything anything else.
The woman trembled under his glare.
Everyone only has one life.
She opened her
so
mouth
we shouldn't
but
make
didn't
a
say
rash
anything
decision.
in the end.
She was only a
from his
lowly
chair and said,
songstress, while the other was an outstanding talent among the scholars.
The young man's
of Qing
words
and
were
Fu.
extremely
Naturally,
reasonable.
she did
It
not
would be
dare to
best
say
if he could
anything
be
more.
exempted from the
After
punishment
casting
too.
an apologetic
You're right,
look at
County
one
Magistrate
watching,
Lee.
he quietly
County
retreated.
Magistrate Lu
They
nodded
were
with a
already used to
confused
such
look
a scene,
as he had no idea
the singers
what
and
Lee was
actors
trying
had
to say.
expressions of grief
I've heard
and
of a
indignation
punishment
on their
called
faces,
punishment,
but they could only
it
lower their
involves
heads
stripping
in
the
silence.
criminal's clothes and
You
smearing
really don't
honey
want to
all
sing?
over his body.
When the man
Before
from the Chui
placing a
clan
few
said
ant
this,
nests
he
next
raised
to
his
the
voice
criminal.
slightly.
The ants are
Many
fond of
people in the
sweetness,
surroundings
thus
stopped
they would
talking
crawl
and looked
all
over
over
the
the criminal's
criminal's
body.
Even if
What
they were
happened to
bitten,
Brother
they would
Yen
not leave
Xian?
any wounds. Why don't you try it?
Li said with a smile, but
Strange,
in the eyes of
why
the
is
bailiffs,
Brother Yen
his smile
Xian
looked
making
like
things
that of the
difficult
devil.
for a performer?
The mere thought of the scene
he
made
drank
them
quite
feel
a bit just now.
uncomfortable.
as
I'm
if
afraid
countless
he's a little
ants were
drunk
crawling
now.
all over their
There
bodies.
were also some people who
Some
were
of them
closer
even
and knew
reached
the
out
whole
their
story.
hands to grab the
They
ants.
gave a simple
Li
explanation.
Xian's eyes were filled
Everyone
with terror
guessed that
too.
Cui Yanxin
The
was
scene
really
described
drunk
by
by
Li
Li
Yi
was
making
too
things
intense,
difficult for an
causing
actor
him
for
to
no reason.
subconsciously glance
Speaking
at
of
the
which,
ground.
the wine in the
When he
manor
saw
was
a
really
few
good.
ants crawling under
Scholars
his feet,
couldn't live
he
without
immediately
wine.
raised his
All
legs
of them
and
had
moved away
amazing
from them.
alcohol tolerance,
County
but
Magistrate
they didn't
Lu
dare to
secretly
drink too
swallowed
much
his
tonight
saliva
because the wine was
causing
too strong.
goosebumps to rise on
Normally
his skin
they
as he
would raise
recalled
their
a
cups
certain
and drink
scene.
to their heart's
Ant
content.
punishment?
But tonight,
After
they were
hearing
worried
the
that
young
they would
man's
get drunk
words,
and cause
Zhao
trouble.
Feng, who was kneeling
Everyone
on the ground,
looked at
could
the
not
two of
help
them
but
with an
shiver
expression of
as
interest,
cold sweat
but
ran
no one
down
went
his
up to
back.
mediate.
What he
A
hated
mere
the most in his
performer,
life
a
was
lowly
to see
girl if
things
she
that
was
were
in
densely
trouble, then
packed
she was in
together.
trouble.
Just the
No
thought
one
of
would
ants
take it to
crawling
heart.
all over his body
Brother
made him feel
Yanxin,
worse than death.
I'm afraid it's not
His body no
appropriate to
longer
make
had
things
the
difficult
strength to
for a
support
weak girl
itself,
like this.
and he collapsed
One
on the floor.
watching was about to
My
grit her
lord,
teeth
this
and
lowly
agree
one
when
has
a
confessed.
luxuriously
This
dressed
lowly
young
one has
man walked
confessed.
out of the
This
crowd
lowly
and walked
one was
over.
the one who started
Brother
the fire.
Zian, what is the
This
meaning of
lowly
this?
one was the one who
Cui
started
Yanxin
it.
looked at the young
Frightened
man
by a
coming over
certain
and
scene
asked
in his
with a
mind,
frown.
Shopkeeper
He and
Zhao
Jiang
collapsed
Zi
to the
and
ground.
were both scholars of
His
Qing
face was
Fu who had
pale and
passed
his
the
eyes
exams
were
this
filled
year.
with terror. In the past,
Even his
they
voice
hadn't
was
interacted
weak.
much. Looking at that
Tonight
guy
they had
lying there
spoken
like
a
a
few
pile of
words.
mud,
Presumably,
he wasn't someone who liked
This
to
is
meddle
just
in
an
other
ordinary
people's
ant.
business. Don't you
Why
see
was he
those
standing
reality
up for
TV
this
games in the
performer?
future? The young man smiled and said, Brother Yen Xen, don't be angry. Miss Ruoqing is an old friend to crawl into a box full of snakes, insects, for rats, and ants all by herself. After the two of them looked at each other, Cui Yanxin looked at him strangely and said with a smile, looking at this fellow's face that was as pale as a piece of paper, to be such a sentimental person. He looked like he was about to die from fright. To tell you the truth, did he have a phobia of ants? I've admired Miss Ruoqing for a long time. Zhao was dragged away. This time, when I returned home after graduating with admiration, I want to help her get rid of her lowly status and suddenly bowed at the same time. The young man smiled and cupped his hands at Cui Yanxin. By now, they had put away all the contempt in their hearts for this young county lieutenant. There was no need for torture, no need to since the other had already spoken. Just a few words were enough to make a suspect confess to his crimes. He turned his head to look at the performer. Not to mention the Anshi County Yamen, there are many lords and people of the same age present, or even the entire Jing state who can do this. Why don't you agree? Following such a county lieutenant, considered as a witness, would there be any case they couldn't solve in the future? Intentions. Even before he officially took office, to speak up to help him. Had already convinced all the bailiffs and words make sense based on what happened today. Haha, if Brother Zian stands up for a woman, it will be a story to be told. After witnessing County Lieutenant Li's ability with his own eyes, he won't be allowed to go back on his words in the security of the county in the future. Previously, in an instant, he was worried that His Majesty would force a playboy from the royal family into the county government, but now this worry was completely dispelled. Naturally couldn't legally marry a lowly woman, but they could still take her as a concubine. Since County Magistrate Lu said he could have a month's vacation, among them. Wouldn't it be a waste of the good intentions of the imperial court had long become accustomed to this? Even the exchanging greetings with county magistrates to be famous performers took the opportunity to say goodbye, ready to enjoy his limelight vacation. This kind of atmosphere was quite with a smile that he didn't need to hurry to take office. At this time, although it was against his faces of the other singers and performers had long disappeared, which was far less important than selling a favor to counties full of envy. For these lowly women, compared to aging and dying alone, this was young man that pushed the door open and came out. That young man had become a genius at a young age after being inexplicably grounded by his father. Even if she became his concubine, the young man's surname Lu was in a good mood today as he could finally come out for a breath of fresh air. Jiang Zian looked at the beautiful woman with a smile and said softly, who was always venting his anger on him for no reason. Hearing this, the young man's surname Lu decided to stay far away from his father when he saw him, Jiang, lest he got into trouble with kindness. But when he came out from the back office, he happened to see a person coming out from stronger and stronger. The moment he saw the young dizziness and picked up a piece of rice paper with Cui Yanxin's new lyrics written on it, followed after by bowing slightly to Jiang Zi. There was a way to heaven, but you didn't take it without looking to hell. Unexpectedly, everyone met this guy in the county government who had ruined his plan and beat him up. Could it be that this guy had been sued? When the singers and performers saw this, some regret appeared on their faces. If it had been them, they would have agreed without hesitation. Lu laughed wildly, strode over, Jiang Zi's face froze, and said sarcastically, after a while, he smiled again and said, one day you would fall into my hands. That it was Zian's wishful thinking. Seeing that the scholar was stunned rejected in front of so many people, the young man caused him to lose a lot of face. More comfortable. However, when he was about to call for a servant, furious in his heart, he suddenly heard an extremely gloomy slightest bit of displeasure fall into whose otherwise it would only make wearing an official's boots too narrow-minded. Out from the hall. Cui Yanxin was a little surprised by this, who was standing at the door, was not prepared and was kicked in the buttocks. An's matter had nothing to do with him. Fell down the corridor. Since the performer went up to steady himself, his original purpose had been achieved. Which son of a bitch dares to kick me? Everyone stopped thinking about this matter and turned to discuss Cui Yanxin's lyrics scared out of his wits. I just saw Yen Xin's. What did you just say? It is a rare piece of work. County Magistrate Lu's face was as black as the bottom of Brother Yen Xin will be in the limelight again. Haha, with the world in your heart, you can't. The young man's surname Lu's voice trembled. You were worried about the country and the people. Before he finished speaking, Brother Magistrate Lu waved his hand and ordered a servant. Hearing this, Cui Yanxin's face showed a little pride. And put him in confinement Tonight, for 3 months. He was in a good state of mind, he is not allowed to step out of the room without my permission. He wanted to leave a good impression in front of everyone. Hearing this, the young man surnamed Lu only felt that his vision was afraid that he would add a lot of color to the lyrics. If it weren't for the servant who saw that the situation was not good and held him up, he would have been unable to stand. Before Wanruwatching reached 3 months of confinement, the feeling of dizziness became more and more intense. He looked at the young scholar, when she stepped on the steps, even a fool would know that the reason why his father was angry was all because of him. Right at this moment, on earth was this pair of strong hands after the young man surnamed Lu was taken away by the servant, pulled away. County Magistrate Lu turned her head and saw a familiar face. County Magistrate Lu, I'm really sorry. Are you okay? My son is naughty and mischievous. The young man looked offended County Magistrate Lu. I'm fine. I hope you don't take it to heart. Wanruwatching resisted the discomfort and gently shook Magistrate Lu was anxious. The young man looked at her pale face and remembered what he had just seen outside. Today he actually dared to speak arrogantly in front of her hands. After glancing at County Magistrate Lu away, he must teach him a good lesson. What the hell is this? If this unfilial son didn't repent, disdainful voice sooner or later he would become like County Magistrate Joe's brother-in-law and make a big mess for him. Chapter 166. She had worn the uniform of a bailiff for a long time and then changed into a woman's dress. It wasn't just Lu's face darkened strange. Even Emmings herself wasn't used to it. With a cold snort, it was clearly inappropriate to wear the uniform of a bailiff at an occasion like tonight. In order not to follow the footsteps of the awkward clothes and brushed past It was time to teach She walked to the end of the road and then turned back from the other side. Come and get the family punishment. She was clearly familiar with County Magistrate Lu said in a cold voice. She turned back and walked for a while before going up to an exquisite little building. As a trusted follower of County Magistrate Lu, he was familiar with these things. The middle-aged man who had just chatted with Letitia's sat down in a room by the window on the second floor. But he had never been so angry like today. Stood silently behind County Magistrate Lu's face before he left. Your Majesty. He observed a moment of silence. On the other side, his young master and Ning Wang Fei respectfully bowed. This time, the County Magistrate was going to do it for real. There is no need for such formalities. A miserable voice came from a yard in the back hall of the man called Li Hong chuckled as he sat down. I know I was wrong. At this moment he was in a good mood. I dare not do it again. Just now, when the young man did not know his identity and casually chatted with him for a while, was lying on a bench and his whole body was tied up compared to hearing the County Magistrate Lu held a bamboo stick in his hand and a voice came from the door. Princess, I have a small leather whip in my hand are waiting for you inside. In the willow village, the little maid was humming the song that the son-in-law taught her. The Empress was the first to stand and wave at her. Cyan official uniform with soap and hung it in the yard. Walked over and first bowed to the two. And the weather was good today, so it could be dried in the evening. Waiting for the son-in-law to wear it when he came back. Come and sit. Why hasn't the son-in-law come back stood yet? And held her hand, sitting in the yard, letting him sit between the little maid and habitually held her cheek in her hand and looked at the door. This child, you haven't come to the Wang Fu to visit Yin Yang and return to the village last night. When you were young, and he might have slept in the shop the most. She hadn't seen him yet, I was afraid she was causing trouble for Yin Yang. Looking at the door blankly, she gradually held her cheek with both hands, and suddenly thought of the story that the son-in-law once told. Ning Wang said that a long time ago there was a woman, a hint of blame in her eyes. Since her husband joined the army, why didn't you just stay in the palace and why did you come here to her husband's return every day? Since ancient times, after a long time, has a princess turned into a stone, which was called Wang Fei's words made her feel somewhat at a loss. She began to imagine that if this time another person strode in, would she turn into a stone? Finally, if the son-in-law came back and saw that she had turned into stone, a servant passed on Ning Wang's words, telling him to come to this little building. So he immediately rushed over. Tears fell on the stone she turned into, middle-aged man on the main seat. Li Xian was stunned for a moment. Then the autumn sun bowed again, but not glaring. Greets Uncle Huang. A gentle breeze blew past, and the little maid's face was flushed red. Jing after looking in one direction for a long time, had to sit down. Gradually felt sleepy. After he sat down, the Empress seemed very comfortable. Her little body was curled up in it and her eyes were still looking out the door. She turned to look at Emmingzu with dissatisfaction and said, "You child, who told you to secretly bring wine to father? Don't you know that your father has asthma and can't drink? And Changda, I told you to look at His Majesty and you just look at him like this? Don't think that I don't know that without you, the wine would not have reached His Majesty's hands. This old servant knows his mistake." The old man behind Jing Emperor heard this and immediately knelt down. "Get up, Jin is also at fault in this matter. Let's not mention it anymore." Jing Emperor waved his hand and suddenly sniffed. He asked in confusion, "Where is the fragrance coming from?" Since he didn't want to mention this matter again, the Empress didn't say anything more. She followed his topic and said with a smile, "Your Majesty doesn't know, this thing is called perfume. It was given to me by Xian just now." "Perfume?" Jing Emperor's face was slightly surprised. Before he could speak, a trace of doubt appeared on his face again. He turned to look out of the window.
Just at that moment, the originally noisy atmosphere outside suddenly became quiet. Below the small building was a spacious area. It was the place where the officials discussed the affairs of the state tonight. Sitting on the upper floor, one could hear a few words. They were used to the noisy arguments. Now that it had suddenly become quiet, it naturally made one suspicious. The old eunuch named Changda had already walked to the window. When he looked down from the window, a trace of surprise appeared on his old face. It's him. After a while, Jing Emperor stood up from his seat and walked to the window. When he saw the young figure below, he couldn't help but smile. It's him. Seeing the expression on Jing Emperor's face, Prince Ning and Li Xian also walked over with some doubts. What the hell? The young man crumpled Cui Yanxin's poem into a ball and threw it on the ground like a piece of scrap paper. Coupled with the mocking and disdainful expression on his face, the scholars who were waiting for the performer to sing the poem were clearly stunned where they stood. Arrogant, too arrogant. The next moment, such a thought emerged in their minds. Cui Yanxin's face had already turned red. He strode over and looked coldly at the guy who came out of nowhere. He gritted his teeth and asked, "What did you say?" This person's action just now was obviously looking down on his proud work. This was an unbearable insult for a scholar who valued talent very much. If he let him go like this, today's matter would definitely become a stain on Cui Yanxin's life. It's him? Isn't this the person who was reprimanded by Professor Feng just now? Yanxin once had a grudge against him? Many people present had just seen the scene of Professor Feng's anger, and someone instantly recognized Li Yi. I say, don't take out such a clumsy work to show off. You still want him to sing it? It's not your fault that the poem is bad, but it's your fault that it tortures others' ears when you sing it. Li Yi had never had a good impression of this so-called scholar who looked gentle on the surface but was actually sanctimonious. It was the same with Shen Zhao, and it was the same with this man surnamed Cui. After studying for a few years, he thought that he was the most talented person in the world. He was condescending, putting on a high and mighty appearance, bullying a woman, and everyone else just watched coldly from the side. In the future, the Jing kingdom would be governed by such a person, so why would it not perish? Of course, the most important point was that the person he bullied was someone Li Yi knew, and he often missed the taste of the two osmanthus cakes she made. Arrogant. His proud work was said to be worthless, especially the sentence, "It's not your fault that the poem is bad, but it's your fault that it tortures others' ears when you sing it." This sentence almost made Cui Yanxin spit out a mouthful of old blood. There was not a single curse word in the whole sentence, but when it was put together, Cui Yanxin had the urge to strangle the person in front of him. He shouted angrily, "Arrogant person, what good poem can you come up with? Take it out for everyone to see. Today all the officials are here. If you can't come up with a good poem and insult your peers for no reason, I will ask all the officials to report you in front of His Majesty." At this moment, Cui Yanxin was also angry and depressed. He did not know the person in front of him at all, and thought he was some new scholar. Being insulted like this, with his personality, of course he would not let it go. He was extremely confident in his poem, and in a moment of impulse he said these words. In the distance, a few local officials of Qing, and also walked over. Professor Feng was walking at the front, and before he had even stopped, he heard Cui Yanxin's words. When he raised his head to look at the person in front of him, he staggered and almost fell. Yanxin? Cui Yanxin was someone he thought highly of, and he had not let him down in this imperial examination. He had obtained the title of scholar, and he really did not want to see Cui Yanxin be humiliated again. These days he had been preparing for the imperial examination in the capital, and did not know anything about the recent events in Qing and prefecture. Naturally, he did not understand that competing in poetry with the young man in front of him was practically asking to be humiliated. "Master Feng, I have made up my mind. Today I will not tolerate this humiliation." Cui Yanxin waved his sleeve and said with a face full of determination. Although they were slightly disappointed that he only gave a birthday poem, they had to admit that the poem and handwriting were excellent. Could it be that I've underestimated him? When Jing Di looked down in surprise, Mingzhu's eyes also stopped on Li Yi. Most of the time he was easy to get along with, but if he showed that kind of expression, it meant that someone was going to be unlucky. "You should go and participate." He was already an adult, but he was still as childish as a naughty child. When he couldn't bully others, he went to complain to an adult. However, Cui Yinxin's words obviously did not scare Li Yi. If he had the ability, he should go and participate. It would be best if he could make him lose his position as a county officer. In the future, he would definitely put 2 incense sticks in his house to thank him. You should go and participate. When Cui Yinxin heard this, he felt like he had punched cotton. He almost couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He met a handsome man who didn't know any tricks. He couldn't use any of his methods. Li Yi. Wan Ruoqing's pale face showed panic. She hurriedly picked up the Shen paper that he had crumpled into a ball from the ground. I'm fine. I just want to sing another song. It's nothing. Li Yi standing out at this moment was equivalent to standing on the opposite side of all the officials. Moreover, there were so many officials here. If he offended them, his future career would really be ruined. Even though she was very grateful for Li Yi's bravery, she couldn't ruin his future for her own selfishness. After all, the road of an official career was really too important for a scholar. Li Yi once again crumpled the paper into a ball. After Wan Ruoqing saw his eyes, she didn't speak anymore. There was a trace of determination in her beautiful eyes. Among the officials of Qing and Prefecture present, there were only 3 people who knew Li Yi: County Magistrate Lu, Professor Feng, and Magistrate Dong. County Magistrate Lu had, of course, investigated his subordinates. The results also surprised him. Suppressing Xin Zhao, making Yang Yanzhou feel ashamed of his inferiority, and rising to the top among the scholars of Qing and Prefecture. Professor Feng and Magistrate Dong had a deeper understanding of Li Yi. In terms of essays and poems, there really weren't many people present who could beat him. To be able to write such essays and poems, his talent in other areas must not be low. If it weren't for the fact that he had no interest in an official career, these people would most likely be suppressed by his brilliance in this year's imperial examinations. Brother, since you don't like Brother Yan Xian's poems, I'm afraid you already have something better in mind. Why don't you take it out for us to see? Jiang Zi walked out from the crowd and said with a smile. When his gaze swept past Ruoqing, a haze flashed across his eyes. No wonder she didn't agree. So she already had a lover? If you have any good poems, quickly take them out. Don't always hide them. After another voice sounded, everyone's gazes turned in that direction. Li Yi saw that the official who had come to Rui workshop with Professor Feng last time had spoken up before anyone else. He was slightly surprised. However, he also knew that if he didn't bring out something good today, it would be difficult to get through this. Miss Ruoqing, I'll have to trouble you to grind the ink, Li Yi said to Wan Ruoqing with a smile. Wan Ruoqing nodded and didn't move. The middle-aged official who had just spoken waved his sleeves and said, No need, I'll grind the ink for you myself. Magistrate Dong actually couldn't stand to see a few men make things difficult for a woman, but he wanted to see what kind of masterpiece Li Yi could write. After all, it was fine if he didn't do anything. Once he did, it would shake the entire poetry world in Qing and Prefecture. Based on the current state of the poetry world, stirring things up like this often was beneficial. Li Yi watched as the minor official walked to the side and started to grind the ink. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This minor official didn't have a high position, but he liked to be in the limelight. The other officials hadn't said anything yet, but he was very proactive. His future would probably be like this. As for the others, they were guessing the meaning behind Magistrate Dong's actions. For a moment they weren't sure. He dipped the brush in the ink and glanced at Cui Yinxin. With a wave of his hand, a line of words flowed out like floating clouds and flowing water. Ugly slave. After the poem was written, some of the officials couldn't help but cry out when they saw the elegant handwriting. Good writing. Disregarding the content of the poem, just these 3 words were enough to make them look at the young man in front of them in a different light. Magistrate Dong and Professor Feng had seen Li Yi's writing before, so they weren't too surprised. However, when they saw the words written on the uppercase, they glanced at each other and then looked at Cui Yinxin at the same time. The youth doesn't know the taste of worry. Love to go up to the next level and forcefully express worry for the sake of composing a new poem. Cui Yinxin's poem just now roughly meant, he had nothing to do and climbed a tall building alone. He worried about the country and the people, so much so that he couldn't eat or sleep peacefully. He grew thinner day by day. The whole poem could be summed up in one word: worry. Just now he didn't think there was anything wrong with this poem. Thinking about it now, it seemed a bit pretentious and unwell. After all, he looked full of energy and his body was wide and fat. He didn't look like he was growing thinner day by day. However, this was actually a common failing of many scholars. Normally they wouldn't pay attention to these things. If it was brought up, most people would probably be labeled as forcefully expressing worry for the sake of composing a new poem. But now that it was pointed out, naturally it couldn't be ignored. At this moment, Li picked up his brush and finished writing the first and second part. The youth doesn't know the taste of worry. He loves to compose a new poem and forcefully expressing worry. Now that he knows the taste of worry, he wants to say it but doesn't. He wants to say it but doesn't. It's a cool autumn. Professor Feng raised his head and glanced at Li. As a professor of the government school, how could he not see that this sorrow was not the sorrow of parting, but the sorrow of home and country? The layers of foreshadowing were tactful and subtle, but not revealing. It was already an excellent piece of writing. But the problem was, what was with the sorrow and anger revealed in the whole poem? How could he have such experience at such a young age? With his attainments in poetry, he definitely didn't write this poem to express his feelings, but to slap people in the face. Forcefully expressing worry for the sake of composing a new poem. Cui Yinxin had just finished worrying and he wrote such a sentence. Professor Feng sighed. He hoped that after tonight Cui Yinxin wouldn't be traumatized. At this moment, the expressions of the surrounding scholars also changed. They still had the ability to judge. This poem was indeed much better than Cui Yinxin's poem. Of course, the first sentence was more important. The youth doesn't know the taste of worry. He loves to compose a new poem and forcefully expresses worry. Wasn't the word young man referring to Cui Yinxin? Even they felt like they had been shot in the knees. Life had just begun. There were many things that had not been experienced. How could he have so many worries? Thinking of the poem he had written before, he couldn't help but feel a burning sensation on his face. At this moment, Cui Yinxin's face was pale as he stared blankly at the paper. It was as if a sharp knife had pierced his heart. 2 streams of hot tears rolled down from his eyes. He raised his head to look at Li. The sorrow and anger in his heart had reached the sky. Forcefully expressing worry for the sake of composing a new poem. Do you dare to be more ruthless? Cui Yinxin's vision darkened and he fainted on the spot. Chapter 168. In ancient times, there was a person who loved poetry as much as his life. When he was defeated in a poetry contest, he could not calm down and vomited 3 liters of blood. Today there was Cui Yinxin who was slapped in the face and fainted because of the phrase, writing a new poem to express sorrow. Although Cui Yinxin was not as good as the poet, if what happened tonight was spread out, he would become a laughingstock for many people. Many years later, perhaps the Zhuangyuan and Tanhua of the same year, or even the emperor, would be forgotten by the later generations. The name of Cui Yinxin would be known by everyone when the story of writing a new poem to express sorrow was mentioned. Cui Yinxin had just fainted due to a sudden surge of hot blood. There was no need to call for a doctor. Everyone helped him to a chair at the side, pinched his philtrum and slapped him. After a few breaths he slowly woke up. His face was still very red. No one knew whether it was because of anger or because of the slap. He pretended to be weak and did not dare to come closer. The damage of that poem to him was even more serious than dozens of floggings. From now on, Cui Yinxin would never be able to get rid of the hat of writing a new poem to express sorrow. At this time, the scholars and officials in the field immediately changed the way they looked at the young man. Unofficial history once said that in the Shu Han dynasty, Zhuge Kongming used his glib tongue to make Wang Longli speechless. Wang Longli was so ashamed that he fell off his horse and died. They thought it was just an exaggeration in the unofficial history. Seeing the situation today, they unconsciously believed it. Wan Ruoqing clenched the corner of her clothes tightly. She knew that Li was good at poetry, but these people were also outstanding scholars and new scholars. They were far from those who claimed to be gifted scholars. However, when she saw that the young man fainted after Li wrote a poem, she forgot the discomfort in her body. Her cherry lips slightly opened, but she could not say anything. The next moment, the surprise in her heart turned into nervousness and worry. Oh no, oh no. Li made that man faint in front of so many Jinshuren officials. They won't let this go easily. If they are displeased then, she blamed herself. If she hadn't refused Cui Yinxin's request, this wouldn't have happened. While she was feeling extremely remorseful, Jiang Zian walked over with a gloomy face. Yan Xian and Your Excellency are both grand scholars of the same year. Don't you think Your Excellency's actions are a bit too much? 2 scholars who did not know each other would address each other as brother when they met. The word, sir, on the other hand, carried a sense of alienation. The surrounding Jinshi also agreed, and almost all of them stood against Li Yi. Although he was targeting Cui Yanxin, he had scolded almost everyone present. It was a bit too much, and everyone was naturally dissatisfied with him. The officials present didn't care much about it. The officials present didn't care too much about this. They had been in the officialdom for many years and had experienced many things. It was common for scholars to be jealous of a woman. They asked themselves honestly. If that woman was also someone they liked and was scolded by Cui Yanxin like this, they would also do something indignant. Of course, Magistrate Dong's actions just now also made these old foxes not speak easily. Sorry sir, you guessed wrong. I am not a new Jinshi. Li looked at him and said calmly. I. Jiang Ziyan's expression froze, and the people around him were also shocked. Did he just say I? That was to say, the person in front of them had become an official before them. This year, the imperial court hadn't appointed a new Jinshi, which meant he wasn't in the same year as them. Although they would walk this path sooner or later, it wasn't now. Everyone looked at Cui Yanxin. This was embarrassing. This time it was likely that the lords would not stand on their side. Wan Ruoqing looked at Li Yi, surprised and suspicious. When did he become an official? Was he lying to these people? It would be fine if it was on other occasions, but there were many officials here today and he couldn't fool them. County Magistrate Li, you are indeed worthy of your reputation as the first scholar. But what is this I don't want to say, but it's a cool autumn day mean? Magistrate Dong looked at him and said with a smile, I'm curious. County Magistrate Li, why don't you say what you are worried about? You don't have to worry about offending anyone. The scholars of the Jing Kingdom won't be convicted based on their words. As soon as Magistrate Dong said this, everyone quieted down. His words revealed a lot of information. County Magistrate Li, the first scholar. And then there was the melancholy revealed in this poem. What was the melancholy? Magistrate Dong's words let go of Cui Yanxin's matter, and no one paid attention to Jiang Ziyan, who had just stood up. The new Jinshi wondered what was going on with this first scholar. Magistrate Dong seemed to be very familiar with him, and they wondered if what they did just now made Magistrate Dong unhappy. Magistrate Lu and some lower-ranked officials were probably thinking the same thing, but Professor Feng and the people around Magistrate Dong knew that Magistrate Dong's words weren't that simple. When they thought about the poem just now, they suddenly understood. Worried about the country, unable to say it, was he afraid of something? Could it be that he was using this to express his dissatisfaction with the peace faction that controlled the court's politics? At this time, the way Professor Feng looked at Li Yi changed for the first time. Using the past to contrast the present, using something to describe nothing and using nothing to describe something, he highlighted the word worry, and used this as a clue to spread out layer by layer. The feelings were sincere and tactful, and the words were shallow but the meaning was deep. If it was a loyal official who was being pushed aside and had no way to serve the country, it was understandable that he would be worried. But he clearly had no desire to become an official, and he didn't want to be one, so why would he be worried? Reading carefully, what was revealed between the lines was that he saw the country's affairs deteriorating day by day, and he was powerless to do anything about it. He was not willing to become an official because he didn't want to be used by the peace faction, and the stubborn disease of not being an official was probably an excuse because of this. No wonder Magistrate Dong looked at him differently. If this was really the case, then his worries were all in Magistrate Dong's heart. It turned out that he had been wrong about him all along. A trace of red appeared on Professor Feng's face. This kind of feelings, he was far inferior to him. At this time, Li Yi was still depressed in his heart. Where did this small official come from, and why did he have so many problems? He didn't even know what he was worried about. There was only one purpose for taking out this poem, and that was to slap the face of the shameless Jinshi who even bullied girls. How could he think so much? Even Professor Feng didn't say anything. Why did an official keep interrupting? Didn't he see that Professor Feng's face was red with anger? County Magistrate Li, Magistrate Dong is asking you a question. Although County Magistrate Lu was very afraid of Li Yi's background, it wasn't good to keep Magistrate Dong there. Seeing this, he spoke in a low voice to remind him. What, Magistrate Dong? Li Yi was stunned. A small official suddenly became a magistrate. This change was too sudden and he couldn't react for a while. Chapter 169. I know that those who offend him will not have a good ending. Above the small building, Li Xian did not care that the emperor and empress were here and laughed without grace. It was the first time he had seen someone faint from anger with just one poem. At this moment he couldn't help but think of the mid-autumn poetry meet. In Mianxiu Garden, the so-called second scholar of Qin and Fu had provoked him. When Li Yi finished his poem, all those so-called scholars had stopped talking. It was a pity that he had not been there. Otherwise he would have felt it more deeply. He made up his mind that in the future he would ask for a few poems from Li Yi. When the time was right he would throw them out like this and shock everyone. That feeling would be extremely satisfying. Little Xian, don't be rude. The emperor and empress were still here. Seeing that he did not have the bearing of a prince, Ning Wang couldn't help but reprimand him. Wanting to speak but not wanting to speak, the sky is cold in autumn. Interesting. Changde, send someone to summon him. He didn't expect that the young man he met by chance in the garden would have so many entanglements with the royal family. Emperor Jing also admired him very much. He wanted to see what kind of expression he would have when he knew his true identity. After saying this, he suddenly furrowed his brows imperceptibly. The heavy feeling in his chest appeared again and his breathing became difficult. However, he experienced this kind of situation almost every few days, so he did not pay it too much attention right now. Downstairs, Li Yi had just learned from County Magistrate Lu that the curious little official just now was the Qin and Prefectural Magistrate. After a moment of shock, he composed himself and bowed. Sir Prefectural Magistrate, I have nothing to worry about. I was just casually lamenting. Casually lamenting? Hearing this, Cui Yinxin felt his blood boil again. Even when Magistrate Dong heard this, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Last time he didn't reveal his identity, so he casually brushed him off. But this time in front of all the officials, did he dare to be more serious? Just as Magistrate Dong was about to speak again, a servant from the manor came over and said, Li Li, His Highness invites you. The Wang Yi that the servants of the Wang Fu mentioned was naturally Ning Wang. When the officials heard this, they were all stunned. Why did the prince invite County Magistrate Li? Then they realized another problem. How could a small county officer be qualified to attend the princess's birthday banquet? Even Prefectural Magistrate Dong was slightly surprised by this matter. The emperor had personally written the title, the princess and Ning Wang both treated him. Was this County Magistrate Li not simple? Only County Magistrate Lu didn't feel strange at all. What was Ning Wang? Even if the servant had said, His Majesty invites him, he wouldn't have been surprised. After all, he had witnessed that scene with his own eyes. Why did Prince Ning invite me? As the person in question, Li Yi was also at a complete loss. This little one doesn't know. Li Li, hurry up and go with this little one. Don't let His Highness wait for too long. The servant urged. Li Yi turned his head to look at Wan Ruoqing. Before he spoke, Magistrate Dong waved his hand and said, Hurry up and go. I promise that after you leave, no one will make things difficult for this girl. Since Miss Ruoqing is not feeling well, you should go back and rest early. The words of the prefectural magistrate were very credible. Li Yi said to Wan Ruoqing and then left with the servant. On the way he was still thinking, could it be that Li Xian has been thinking too much recently and Ning Wang wants to get even with me? After thinking about it, he felt it was unlikely. After all, after countless tests, he was very confident about Li Xian's mental endurance. If he couldn't figure it out, he wouldn't think about it. After all, he had saved the princess. As a prince, he shouldn't be ungrateful and bite the hand that feeds him. Li Li, His Highness is upstairs. Go up by yourself. The servant brought him around. Li Yi looked at the small building strangely, then looked at the servant again. Suddenly, the look in his eyes became a little strange. This small building was clearly the one behind them. Just now, he could have entered from the front door if he turned around. This guy led him in a big circle from the front door to the back door. Wasn't this crazy? He didn't want to argue with the crazy person. When he walked into the little building, he saw rows of guards with weapons in their hands. He thought that this Ning Wang was really extravagant. He didn't feel safe even in his own home. He walked up the stairs. The two guards at the door searched him before letting him in. Anxi County Military Officer Li Yi greets His Highness. After walking in, Li Yi first bowed. Scholars only knelt to their parents and the emperor. His Highness was one level lower than the emperor and only needed to bow twice. After bowing, he raised his head and saw the figures in the room. He was slightly startled. Apart from Ning Wang, who he had only seen in the portrait, everyone in the room was familiar. Li Xian, who was frowning at him, looked coldly at his Emingzu, the high-ranking official who had just treated him to a meal in the garden, and the coffin-faced old man standing behind him. Li Yi sighed in his heart. As expected of a high-ranking official, to be able to sit at the same table as Ning Wang, he must at least be a first-rank official. Then he saw the rank 1 official suddenly clutching his chest. His breathing quickened and a pained expression appeared on his face. In the next moment, his entire body stiffly fell to the ground. Imperial Uncle. Imperial Brother. Imperial Father. Your Majesty. The expressions of the people in the room changed at the same time. There were a few panicked voices. The old eunuch named Changda was the fastest. His figure flashed and disappeared in front of them. He caught Emperor Jing before he fell. Come, quick, call for the imperial physician. The current emperor was suffering from asthma. No matter where he went, there would be an imperial physician. Even if he hid it from the court officials, it was impossible not to bring an imperial physician. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a response from outside the door. 2 figures rushed downstairs. Li Yi, who had been ignored by everyone, stood in the room with a dumbfounded expression. Imperial Brother, Imperial Father, His Majesty, this title. The person who had just treated him to a meal in the garden was actually the emperor? Oh no, His Majesty has no pulse. The old eunuch put 2 fingers on Emperor Jing's wrist. His expression changed and he immediately reached out to pinch Emperor Jing's philtrum. Damn, there's no pulse and his heart has stopped. What's the use of pinching his philtrum? Seeing this, Li Yi muttered in his heart. Even someone as steady as Prince Ning had cold sweat on his forehead. If something happened to his imperial brother in Prince Ning's mansion, the court officials would not care if he was Prince Ning. They would probably accuse him of regicide. Seeing the old man pinching with all his might, Li Yi finally couldn't help but walk over and say, "It's useless to pinch like this. Go away." Changda did not care about anything else at this time. He did not even raise his head and said angrily. Li Yi was slightly annoyed, but he thought that the old man was probably anxious at this moment. It was understandable, so he did not care too much. At this moment, Emingzi grabbed his arm. For the first time, an extremely anxious expression appeared on her usually indifferent face. You have a way. She was very clear about Li Yi's various magical methods. The princess consort's stubborn illness was also cured by him. Thinking of this, Emingzi looked at him with eyes full of expectation. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.